Welcome to the Orlando Sentinel Editorial Board interview with Travaris McCurdy, one of two Democrats facing off in a June 24th special election for Florida House District 40. That seat's being vacated by incumbent LaVon Bracy Davis, who's running on the same date for the Senate seat vacated earlier this year by the death of former Senator Geraldine Thompson. This Democratic primary features two experienced candidates, as McCurdy is a former state representative and Rashawn Young, his opponent, is the current aide to Representative Bracy Davis. The winner of this primary will face a Republican and a nonpartisan candidate in September. This seat, based in West Orange County, runs north of Highway 50 from Ocoee to Lake Fairview and includes Pine Hills and Lockhart. Before we get started, one more brief note. In almost every case, the Sentinel has interviewed candidates jointly, but we're trying something new in the races for this cycle and interviewing candidates separately. So be sure to watch the interviews with other primary candidates as they are posted. To the best of our ability, we'll be asking each candidate to answer the same questions in the same time frame. These interviews are not intended to be debates or brawls. They're a chance for each candidate to talk about what they would hope to accomplish should voters choose them. That's why we ask candidates to refrain from personal attacks and to limit their answers to 1.5 minutes per question. Each candidate will also be given 2 minutes at the end to give a brief closing statement. Joining us today is our opinion editor, Chris Fluker.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
I'm Jay Reddick, the Viewpoints editor, and our executive editor, Roger Simmons, may join us in progress. As you answer these questions, I know you're aware that District 40 was drawn to heavily favor a Democratic candidate. However, Florida Dems have steadily lost ground, both in registration numbers and legislative clout. As we talk about specific issues facing the district, please talk about ways you believe a Democrat could effectively represent this district in a significant way. And now over to Chris for the first question.
Thank you, and thank you again for joining us. House and Senate leaders have settled on the budget as of last night that they say will include an elimination of sales tax on commercial leases, multiple permanent sales tax exemptions aimed at families, and some other cuts, in addition to some money for the debt reduction and the reserve fund. Do you think that these non-spending cuts are fair to Floridians, and are they a good idea?
I think any fair and sensible approaches to save Floridians money so they can afford to live here, those are welcomed, not just by elected officials, but by everyday working people. Folks are looking for some relief, and people are looking for, especially when you talk about financially, people who are taking care of families, even single college students, right? People just need some relief. So commercial leases don't extend to every Floridian. Every Floridian doesn't have a commercial lease. So those savings are limited to who they will be able to help. So I absolutely support, again, sensible solutions that will help people be able to afford to live here in Florida. Is there more that the legislature should be doing, could have done? Absolutely. And when you talk about eliminating sales tax, eliminating property taxes, which is something that's been in the news a lot lately here in the state of Florida, again, everybody isn't a homeowner. So those savings don't reach the masses. They don't, the majority of Floridians, those who aren't homeowners, they won't benefit from those rebates, from those savings, from those initiatives. So I support it, but I want to take it a step further and see things that benefit the majority.
And you have pretty much answered my next question, but I would like to maybe put a slightly different twist on it then. The debate has been, as you said, between sales tax cuts and property tax cuts. And I'm wondering, what implications do you think, beyond the issue of who pays, would either of those cuts have for people who depend on state services that those taxes fund?
My concern is with those cuts, you're going to have to make up the revenue somewhere. And what areas are we going to be looking at to make up for the revenue loss? I'm very, very concerned when you talk about local municipalities. For example, Orange County here, where we are, these important social services, these important emergency services. Where are we going to fund these programs and services and initiatives that so many of our neighbors rely on? It's good to have headlines that say we're going to cut this, cut that. It sounds great, but you have to make up the revenue somewhere. And those are the hard and tough decisions that Tallahassee lawmakers sometimes like to avoid. And they just go after the nice, catchy, bright, shiny headline. I'm explaining to constituents, I'm explaining to voters on the ground, it sounds great, but we're going to have to make up the revenue loss somewhere. I support home rule. Most local municipalities aren't as strong as Orange County. They have budget shortfalls. And again, when you're tasked with taking care of those closest to you, our local councils, our local mayors, where are you going to make up the revenue loss? And we see in Tallahassee, they kind of pick and choose what local counties that they like or dislike. So that's an issue.
Well, speaking of lost revenue, I have another question about a different way to do that: tourist development tax. Do you support giving local communities more flexibility in the use of TDT dollars? And if so, how would you choose to use them?
Well, great question, and a question that has come up often on this expedited campaign trail, right? And what I tell people is Travaris McCurdy represents consistency. I think it's very important to be consistent. And I mention that because I am a vocal advocate and ally for the Sadowski Housing Fund. And my argument has always been what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And so I cannot be a vocal proponent for the Sadowski Fund to be used for its only original intent and purposes, which is housing, addressing housing needs, and not afford the same to the tourism development tax. If the legislature of the state of Florida wants a dedicated funding source to improve our roads, to improve for infrastructure improvements, you have to do the hard work again to create that funding source. It's just not fair to voters for us to manipulate, change, modify the intent of TDT. That was not what it was sold to voters when this was passed, when it was introduced. And if we want a dedicated funding source, which I'm totally for, we just have to create it.
One of the things, as you, I'm sure, know very, very well, is that getting local projects into the budget can be a real challenge. First, you have to find a way, as a Democrat, to get projects for this district included. And then you've got to do your best to convince the governor not to veto them, which he has done some pretty broad swath vetoes in recent years. If you are elected, what kinds of projects would you pursue as the most protectable?
I think those are projects that benefit neighborhoods, that benefit communities, not individuals, not nonprofits that I'm tied to or have relationships with. I want to cast wide net so we are, again, providing relief for the most number of people in House District 40 that we can. What does that look like? District 40 is so diverse. When you talk about parks, so College Park, Pine Hills, Lockhart, Mercy Drive, Ocoee. We have to meet with our local officials. That's meeting with the commissioner from the city of Orlando and Commissioner Stewart presently, and whomever will replace him because he's not seeking re-election. That's working with them to identify what improvements they need in the College Park in the 32804 area. Also means having a relationship with the mayor and council over in the city of Ocoee, because they have certain projects that they have forecasted for. They have strategic plans. They have things that they've forecasted and projects that they want to see across the finish line. It's my job in my role as a state representative for this district to meet with not just local elected officials, but meet with residents. And I'm not here to tell them what they want. I'm here to listen to them. We will prioritize as an office, as far as, whether it's converting from septic to sewer, something that I worked in for the city of Apopka years ago as a legislative aide. So it's those types of projects and improvements to infrastructure that would make our district more marketable to bring more businesses to the area.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a couple of questions about the new immigration policy that's recently just passed through the state. That's one issue that did eventually gain agreement between DeSantis, the House, and the Senate. And I've got two questions about it. First, please give us your assessment of the legislation, first from a public policy or moral standpoint, and then after that, we'll talk about the money aspect of it.
From our political or moral standpoint on immigration, we have to not criminalize, not demonize people who want to come to this country to make their lives better for them and their families. I don't support that. I don't support negative rhetoric or dangerous rhetoric to spew or taint the perceptions of Floridians when we talk about our brothers and sisters who weren't necessarily born here. We're all immigrants at the end of the day. We are all immigrants, but I do support a pathway, a legal pathway to citizenship, here in the United States, obviously in the state of Florida. If you want to be here, you have to do it the right way. But I think there is a way, and we need more compassion in Tallahassee. We need more compassion. We should be leading with compassion. And not allowing the federal government or certain actors to influence and guide how we do business here in Florida.
All right, moving forward to the fiscal side of it. Local governments are now apparently obligated to house and care for people suspected of being in Florida illegally. Should Florida's immigration plan survive any court challenges, how can these costs be fairly allocated?
Well, when you have unfunded mandates, how can they be fairly allocated? Which is a great question, and a question that the legislature oftentimes leaves on the table for local municipalities to find answers to. So again, it's about having relationships, finding ways in a state where we have had a budget surplus over the last 3, 4, 5, sessions. How can we provide more relief, more resources, so that we alleviate this financial strains on our local governments? I think if I had an answer for that, I could probably not be running for the state house, but running for a governor. But I do believe that we, as a legislature, 120 members in the House, 40 people in the Senate, you have an obligation, a responsibility to support local governments. And that's why, again, consistency matters, leadership matters. And Travaris McCurdy, I have always and will continue to support home rule, so that we're making sure that we're strengthening and supporting our local municipalities. Because, I'm sorry, I'll say this last thing, what works in Orange County won't work in Dade, Broward, Bay. And that's why we elect local governments, because they're closest to the people, to find those solutions that work best for their geographic areas and locations.
Well, once again, you've kind of walked right into our next question, which is local governments depend heavily on, and the state depends heavily on the federal government when it comes to major emergencies. And we've all heard what the president has to say about dropping FEMA after the next hurricane season. If so, if that happens, what can the legislature do to make sure that Floridians are prepared to weather a major storm?
We have to strengthen programs, fully fund programs, home hardening programs, especially for our seniors and those vulnerable populations in certain zip codes and areas where they have historic issues of flooding, right? Home hardening is something that is very important, something that I've been talking about on the campaign trail, just to make sure that your homes are protected and up to date modernized with improved infrastructure, with improved, but the FEMA issue is not the only thing that I'm watching from the federal level that they're trying to downsize and relinquish to state governments. What about HUD? There are proposals on the federal level to downsize HUD. They, and relinquish housing issues to the states. That is a concern. That should be a concern for all of us, especially in a state where, we have a legislature that has criminalized homelessness, essentially. If you're going to downsize HUD, if you're going to put these 2-year that right now they're proposals in DC to put 2-year bans on Section 8 recipients, 2 years. And then what? I don't think 2 years is enough time for anyone to be to turn their lives around, to become self-sufficient, and to be able to stand on their own. So we go from no caps at all to a 2-year cap. These are real issues. They're going to be relinquished to the state. I'm happy. I work in housing every day. You need people that know, not just want to fight, but to know what you're fighting for.
And this branches right into the next question, which is about property insurance, which obviously has been a point of contention for several years. The market has shown little signs of recovering. Insurers are denying and delaying claims at a record pace. What can the legislature do, and what should you do to make insurance more reliable and affordable?
A surprise, that we're in this pickle now, when we see over the last 3 to 5 years, so many insurers pack up and leave the state of Florida. And so many Floridians are now forced to be on Citizens property insurance, the state-run property insurance. That I remind people every chance that I get, when Citizens was created, it was never intended to insure this many Floridians. My concern is it's going to very soon burst, and we're going to have a bigger problem on our hands. So what should the legislature be doing? We should be finding ways to lure insurers to come back to Florida so that people have more options. And again, I believe that that would positively impact the price, the premium increases that we see. Because when you have such a small select number of insurers to even choose from, or to choose whether or not to insure you, it's almost becoming a monopoly for those companies. We have to open up the market again, find some best practices, encourage insurers to come back to Florida, so that in Floridians, that our homeowners here have more options as to who will insure them.
Thank you. I'm gonna kind of roll my next 2 questions into one so that we make sure we get you through on time. First off, if you could give us a brief overview of your opinion of the state's current policy with publicly funded education vouchers, especially anybody who wants it gets it policy. And then when you look at the billions of dollars that are going now to vouchers, and given that most Florida children will remain in public schools, how do you maintain the state's constitutional requirement for a system of free, public, high-quality schools?
Great question, and it's a very complicated issue, especially in this district that's so diverse. Again, talk about College Park, Pine Hills, Mercy Drive, Lockhart, Ocoee. Parents appreciate choice. I don't want to pull choice off the table, right? But what I do think is very important that we hold the private charter schools to the same standards as public schools, especially when you are requesting and receiving equitable state funding, taxpayer dollars. And that's just not with curriculum, but it's also with teacher certifications. So this is important. And I think it just has to be a fair balance approach to public education, charter school, vouchers, however you want to frame it. Parents appreciate the options to choose where their children will be educated. I am a proud product of Orange County Public Schools, having spent elementary, middle, and graduated from Orange County Public High School. I understand the benefit of public schools. I understand the strain that public schools have. I think Orange County is projected to have a $28 million deficit going into the next fiscal school year. Those are issues. But if you want to be eligible, if you want to receive equitable taxpayer public funds, you have to be held to the same standards, not just curriculum, but also with teacher certifications.
Thank you for that. I wanted to switch over to talk about water quality for a second. Six years ago, many Floridians believed that the safety and health of the state's water supply was the number one issue. But today it seems to draw little attention. Most sources agree little is improved. What specific steps can you push the legislature to consider when it comes to the health of of Florida's rivers, lakes, marshes, and other surface water, especially when it comes to the aquifer?
I'm sorry, but you know what I have seen over my 6+ years as an aide and the term that I served as a member is the legislature has a very good appetite for water projects, restorative projects, and protecting our natural, commodities that we have here, that we're afforded to have here in the state of Florida. Is there more that can be done? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think that we are on a good and healthy path. And again, as a Democrat, I don't think there'll be many ideas that I propose exclusively that may be adopted by leadership and by, the legislative branch. But what Travaris McCurdy is committed to doing is working across the aisle to find common sense solutions, especially when you talk about environment, water issues, and alike. So I am excited about the opportunity to bring the concerns of folks from House District 40 on environment, on water quality, and speak with leadership and find ways that we can find some common ground to really find some common sense and solutions that we can get done right now. It's not about me going to Tallahassee to get bills and things passed with my name at the top as the prime author, as the prime sponsor. I'm really here to look for some common sense. And again, I just keep hammering down on the word relief, because that's what people ultimately want. And you said that the conversation about the water quality has kind of diminished over the past few years. And I believe that's a direct reflection that it's becoming increasingly more difficult to afford to live here. And so some of those issues do drop down on people's priorities list because folks are just so afraid and just trying to live and make it day by day.
Thank you. Got one last issue to tackle here, and that is healthcare. Florida has one of the highest rates of uninsured residents in the country. What more can the legislature realistically do to ensure that state residents have access to affordable, accessible healthcare?
Expand Medicaid. Accept federal dollars. Stop taking stop playing the monkey see monkey do games with states like Mississippi. We model legislation after some of the worst states in the union on healthcare. Why? And I had said this on the House floor, that we should be looking for best practices. And that is not modeling after states like Mississippi, who are terrible and at the very bottom on healthcare. We can do better. And I'm happy and I'm excited about the opportunity to go back to share with my colleagues again in a more strategic way, in a more diplomatic way, because I don't want our issues and concerns to be shunned out. But there are some best practices that we can find from other states. And I think there are some other states that we should be looking to adopt practices for, who rank higher than states like Mississippi on healthcare.
Thank you so much. There are so many other questions we could ask you because we barely scratched the surface, but we appreciate you taking the time. Before we go to your closing statement, I wanted to remind our readers, the Sentinel will be making an endorsement in this race, but we know that you're best served when you take a look for yourself. Both of these candidates have social media presences, websites, and there are also, of course, talking to our news reporters. So there will be plenty of opportunities to learn more about each candidate, and they are both working very hard to earn your vote. We also want to remind our readers that our endorsement decisions are made by the editorial board. While we definitely read our news coverage, we do not consult with the news department, and they don't play a role in our endorsement decisions. But the most important decision here is yours. So take a look at both of the candidates, decide who best reflects your priorities, your values as a voter in this district. And remember that whether you want to vote by mail, at an early voting site, or at the polls, this is your decision to make. And with that, we would like to invite Mr. McCurdy to make his closing statement and as to why voters should choose him.
Well, again, thank you. Thank you for your audience. Thank you for this opportunity and this platform, as always. I am Travaris McCurdy, a son, a native of Central Florida, born and raised here in Orlando. Again, attended Orange County public schools. My grandmother still live in House District 40. This means more. This is not just a job for me. I am a lifelong public servant, having worked in the process as a legislative aide, as a member, as a professional in this community, having managed small business development for the fourth largest airport in the country, working on housing issues every day to improve public housing here in the Central Florida area. You want somebody who understands this process. I am proud of the work that I have done as a former representative, serving during the height of COVID, making sure that those vaccinations that were only available through the state were making it here to our region to take care of our senior populations, most vulnerable populations. I have served on education committees, everything ranging from pre-K, early childhood education to higher education appropriations. Having relationships, not just in Tallahassee, but here in this district is what matters. This process is not 100% what's done in Tallahassee. I give it the 60-40 rule. It should be 60% of what you do in this district. How you respond to constituents. Is your office responsive? And I am proud to have done that work, not to just bring resources home here to strengthen the Florida Children's Initiative, which led to the expansion from the Paramore Kids Zones to the Mercy Drive Kids Zone. So those type of investments in mentorship, in programs to help our youth is what matters. It's what I'm committed to. That's what I'm dedicated to. I would be honored and delighted to go back to serve the residents and constituency of House District 40 as the next state representative, to continue to work, to build upon the relationships, and to bring resources and relief home to the residents here that need it most. So I appreciate you. June 24th is election day. We can get the job done, but we can only do it together with your help and with your vote. So vote Travaris McCurdy, a friend, a neighbor, an advocate, someone who's going to fight for you, fight for us in Tallahassee.